Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of CISA Live, Preparing for and Mitigating Physical Threats. And we're here today closing out Preparedness Month, and this couldn't come at a more important time. And so, want to just recognize the amazing work and our hearts and our thoughts and our support, our regional support is with those who are dealing with Hurricane Helene. It's amazing to see FEMA, state, local, tribal emergency managers and responders coming together to keep our nation safe. So, tremendous work, and we're with you. But today, I'm with Curt Tilley from the Office for Bombing Prevention and Dan Avondoglio from the Office for Security Programs within our Infrastructure Security Division. And we are rounding out Preparedness Month by talking about how to keep ourselves safe from physical threats. So, Curt, Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So excited to have you guys here and have this great conversation today. I thought that people may not realize the breadth of the critical infrastructure security mission that we have. And so I just thought it might be great for you both to start and, tell us what you do here. Dan, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So within the Office of Security Programs, we maintain a number of programs that help various stakeholders from public to private sector to federal to underserved communities build security capacity to enhance their ability to mitigate risks from a wide range of threats, terrorism and targeted violence. And one of those programs we're interested in talking about today is our Active Shooter Preparedness Program.
Great. Curt.
Yeah, so within the Office for Bombing Prevention, and to keep it simple, I'll say OBP. That's what most people know us as. Within OBP, our mission and goal is to enhance national security, to deter, prevent, and respond to bombing incidents. So a little more specific than our security programs partners there. We accomplish this through technical assistance programs, training and products, outreach, information sharing, but also cover a wide range of topics from bomb threats to IED awareness, suspicious activity awareness, planning and preparedness, which goes right along with this month.
Great. And I think you all just put out the newest edition of Tripwire today.
I think we did put out our latest monthly on Tripwire, was probably released today, yes.
Yeah. I heard that this morning from ISD leadership, and I know everybody looks forward to that. So
yes,
great. Now that we know a little bit about what your offices do, let's talk about what threats you all are planning for, or you kind of see coming down the pike.
Well, when we look at, active shooter, active assailant preparedness, I think, we can all agree that what we see in the media far too often nowadays, that, another shooting, another active shooter event, another incident of hate that inspired an act of targeted violence. And so we look at that threat environment and we analyze the tactics, techniques, and procedures of those who are conducting these attacks. We work with our stakeholders across the whole spectrum of the preparedness cycle, from trying to prevent these incidents, which is always our goal, but enhance protection, mitigation, improve response, and certainly facilitate recovery, preparedness, and planning to help mitigate the risk from these potential threats.
I think for us, we look at two different types of threats, really. We focus on the explosive threat, and most people, when they think of that, they think of some of the bigger profile ones that we've had in the past, whether it be the Boston Marathon bombing, the Nashville bombing on Christmas Day, these types of things. But the truth is there's explosive incidents in this country every day. Not all of them tied to terrorism or even criminal activity, but they occur every day. For us, though, the other threat is the bomb threat, and that is that communication where somebody indicates there's the presence of an explosive device. Although historically and statistically, we know there's not always a device there, they still have an impact of psychological impact and operational impact. And we're seeing more and more of these type of threats being used to distract and harass organizations and individuals. We've seen a disturbing trend in an increase in bomb threats in this country. From 21 to 22, we saw a 35% increase. And from 22 to 23, we saw another 26% increase over that. And as we're, only partway through 24, it still looks like we may see another increase yet again this year.
But we're not powerless as individuals to be prepared, right? So what, for our viewers, what behaviors, what should we be looking for to try to help, identify a threat or, speak up early, those kinds of things? Are there things that we can be looking for to kind of be aware?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, prevention, like I said, is always our goal. And so what's foundational, fundamental, certainly to prevention is vigilance. But it's easy for us to say and talk about vigilance, but what does that mean, right? What does it mean to be observant of your surroundings? We often use the term situational awareness. And I was having a phone conversation with my mom and dad, and I brought that term up when they were asking me about what I did. And they stopped me and said, what's situational awareness?
Yeah.
Never got that question before. Being in the military for decades, you don't ask what the term means, you just know what it means. Well, it really means just understanding and observing what's going on around you so you can make more informed decisions. And part of vigilance is not just understanding what's going on around you, not having your head buried in your cell phone, but then when you do see something that's concerning or suspicious, or being knowledgeable of what is concerning or suspicious, what falls in that kind of category. What do I do with it? Who do I tell? How is it handled? And so we talk about terms like bystander and upstander. And we're all bystanders, but what we're trying to do with the prevention aspect with awareness is create a larger pool of citizens, of critical infrastructure owners and operators who are more vigilant, who are willing to not just be bystanders, but be upstanders.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is an upstander?
Well, so we're all bystanders, but if we're knowledgeable and observant and we know what to say and what to do, are we willing to take the next step of actually saying something about it? The whole concept behind see something, say something. It's see something, say something, but it's equally important to now do something. And so the concept of moving from bystander to upstander is critical to violence prevention.
And I think to build off what Dan's saying, I think one of the things that CISA has done, I've been with the office for 11 years now. And, within the infrastructure security, we have focused obviously a lot on infrastructure security, but over the last several years, CISA has really made a strong emphasis on focusing on a lot of those underserved communities and those underserved and non-government organizations. So although we still protect infrastructure and we work to protect that critical infrastructure, as Dan said, a lot of those owners and operators, we also work with the other communities. For us, the bomb threats are most prevalent against education. We see a lot against faith-based organizations and things like that. So as we now have shifted and focus on those communities as well and helping them understand the importance of situational awareness and suspicious activity awareness and understand the resources that CISA has to help them, that's been a real key and a shift that we've seen the last few years is to focus, not change our focus off of critical infrastructure, but to include these other organizations.
And if I jump in on there, that you too, yeah, when we focus on critical infrastructure, we're looking at both cyber and physical, and we're really concentrating when we're talking about prevention of violence, we're focusing on the people that operate that cyber and physical infrastructure. And so to provide them with tools and resources to enable those people to be more safe, secure, and resilient, right? Training enhances resilience. And it's not all gloom and doom. When we talk about how, hey, we see the threat environment going this way, we also have data that says these incidents are preventable because targeted violence incidents are premeditated. They offer opportunities for us to observe what's going on before things happen. And so by being observant of our surroundings, the data shows that we have opportunities in nearly 80% of these incidents to try to intervene early to get someone the help that they need before they go too far down a pathway.
And I think, so I'm sitting here and here's what I want to do. I want to be an upstander.
Okay.
I want to be an upstander. But it's not just about like situational awareness. And during Preparedness Month, there are other things that we can do, like behavioral threat assessment teams. Talk a little bit about some of that, like the tactical things we can do to be ready.
Yeah, some of it is organizational and community-based.
Mhm.
So certainly within DHS.gov, there's a number of behavioral threat assessment and management resources, sometimes called threat assessment and management, but sometimes the word threat and security can be intimidating for some of our stakeholders. So you may even see terms like a care team, which essentially does the same thing as threat assessment and threat management, so that when an organization or community receives these tips from an upstander who was observant, who knew what to do, knew who to say it to, and then their organization received this information to review it, vet it, maybe cross-reference it with additional community resources, local law enforcement, healthcare providers, to put more pieces of the puzzle together on the suspicious or concerning behavior to help make informed decisions for mitigation. And so with behavioral threat assessment and management, it is really a community approach, but it's one of those unique programs where individuals are the enablers of those community programs.
It's also tailoring those programs to the different communities that we see. We have some great, we're here representing our two offices, but we have some great other programs in the infrastructure security division. And one that comes to mind as we think about behavioral threat assessments and stuff is our school safety program. Our K through 12.
They just had the school safety summit
Yes,
this week.
yes.
Yeah.
And so, they're fantastic about developing those products and those resources tailored to that community. We do the same thing as Dan was talking about, speaking with his parents about situational awareness. We get the question all the time, right? What is suspicious? When we say report something suspicious, you want to be that upstander and see something, say something, and we tell people report something suspicious. That's one of the things we've done is build a whole resource library on recognizing what is suspicious, understanding what that term means, and understanding how that can help you prevent or at least mitigate when you are a victim of these threats.
And so you bring up a good point in terms of the resources available and tailoring. Can you talk a little bit about what people can find and where they can find some of these resources, and any examples of some kind of resources that we have that people might not realize they can use?
Absolutely. And you have two offices up here today, but quite frankly, it really is a team approach, within one CISA and even one DHS. It's not just the active assailant security branch, and it's not just bombing prevention, it's not just school safety. We have various resources that address some of the similar or the same threat vectors from various aspects, different communities, whether it's a K through 12 community, higher education, faith-based, schools, businesses. So some of our resources, such as de-escalation and the power of hello, which help individuals and stakeholders identify suspicious activity, but also help to empower them, give them some easy to use tools, techniques to empower them to feel more comfortable to take action. We also have within our insider threat mitigation program, we have resources that can be tailored by stakeholders to help individuals report information, as well as help organizations review the information that they've received and make more informed decisions. And then certainly with school safety, last year they put out an outstanding resource where they partnered with the Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, and it's their K through 12 bystander reporting toolkit, which while it says K through 12, the techniques and the principles within that resource are applicable to all communities and all organizations.
And within OBP, as I said, we've really, because of the spike that we've seen in the bomb threats I mentioned earlier, we've focused a lot of recent resource development on mitigating those bomb threats. As we know statistically, less than 1% is there an actual device when somebody calls in a threat. However, it still has, as I said, those operational impacts, those psychological impacts on people who are receiving that threat. And so we've developed several resources, from products, full bomb threat guides, to 2-page just quick reference materials, to training. We have courses on how to assess a bomb threat so that you can make better informed decisions on whether you actually evacuate or what you do and how you respond to that threat, knowing some of the statistics. And then we've been able to really partner with some of our key stakeholders out there. So a good example, one of the unities or communities that really received a lot of bomb threats previously was our HBCUs. And we were able to
that was last fall, right?
It was
over months.
Yeah, it was 2022 was really when it really started with the HBCUs, but they continue to receive threats even today. And so we were able to partner with the Atlanta University Center Consortium, which is a consortium of multiple HBCUs in the Atlanta area, through the partnership we have with Region 4 and the PSAs there. And we were able to develop a video specifically for college students. So we think a lot about the owners and operators and how do they respond. But in today's world, those college students, they get that notification on their phone that says, hey, there's been a bomb threat on campus. And so the students were asking, what do we do? So we were able to develop that resource again, and it points back towards situational awareness and increasing your awareness of what is suspicious. And then we've developed as I mentioned, an entire catalog of suspicious activity awareness, because it doesn't matter what the threat is. You may not know whether you're going to get an active shooter event or a bomb threat, but if you have that increased suspicious activity and you know how to recognize it, you're going to mitigate either threat.
You're going to mitigate it earlier.
Exactly.
Right? Like if you have that awareness, you can kind of.
Exactly.
And Curt brought up a great point about partnerships. I mean, we talk about CISA resources. We mentioned a couple of DHS resources, but quite frankly, we couldn't do it without those partnerships that you mentioned in the community. Those folks, when we talk about these topics that we're dealing with today, security is local. Mm-hmm. And so what affects one community in one state may not necessarily affect a community in another state. So it is very local. And those partnerships are critical because they're ultimately the ones receiving and implementing many of the resources, many of the options for consideration that we offer. And I'd call out too, since we're approaching October 7th, 1 year since the Israel-Gaza Middle East situation, we have really close partnerships within our faith community. And one of them is worth calling out, the Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, which is an all threats, all hazards, all faith organization that really focuses on sharing information to help faith-based communities prepare for, enhance their own security, make themselves more resilient.
And you mentioned Region 4, but we have PSAs across the country
100%
who can help organizations navigate through all the resources that we have and use them.
Absolutely. We see ourselves just as an additional tool for those PSAs and for that regional service delivery model, right? That we are that tool that we can provide resources that helps them in the communities as they work within their communities. But the partnerships are key. It's through these partnerships that we truly learn what the needs are and what the gaps are, right? What do they need? We have a lot of smart people in CISA. We have a lot of talented people in CISA. But even the talent that we have doesn't always know what the need is. And so it's through those partnerships that we understand what do these communities need, whether it be the faith-based community or education community. And it's through those partnerships we really understand what are their need, and then what can we do to meet that need, whether it's developing a video, as I mentioned, or developing training, or providing a new resource, or technical assistance, or whatever that is. But we can figure out how to meet that need.
And when we talk about our resources too, it's accessibility, right? Just because our resources are available in free downloadable PDFs in English doesn't mean that's who our only community is. So we have multiple resources translated into nearly 20 different languages. We have a video with American Sign Language embedded. And certainly we need to listen to what's going on in the world. We need to look at what the spectrum of the American population is looking like to identify those next needs. Because our resources may not mean much to those folks who can't access them, who may not be able to read them. And so it's critical to understand the landscape within the country.
And I kind of want to pull the thread a little bit on something that you said, Curt, in terms of the psychological impacts of bomb threats, whether there is a bomb or not. Really, there is, kind of a human element, right, in these, and it's Preparedness Month. And so I think most of us have been through an active shooter drill. I think everybody here at CISA has. And it can be really scary. Can we talk about why, though, that preparation is so important? Can you talk about the human element and how we need to take that into account when we're thinking about security preparedness?
Absolutely. And as we talk about like the bomb threats, you don't know you're going to be a victim of that threat until you've already received it. So what we try to do is develop resources that will, one, mitigate that psychological impact, that fear that automatically comes with, let's say you do have to evacuate. Well, am I safe to go back in the building? Am I safe to come to work tomorrow? Is this going to happen again? Those type of things. So developing those resources and really trying to help people understand. And really that's it, is we use these terms situational awareness and suspicious activity awareness. But what we're really trying to do is just raise people's knowledge about the threat and the understanding. The more people understand what they're dealing with, the lessen that impact has, right? Whatever the threat that they're concerned about or whatever that fear is. So really it's all about education, increasing knowledge to be able to lessen that impact.
And along those same lines too, is it's in addition to education, that education training helps improve resilience. So if the first time that you're thinking about a bomb threat or an active shooter event is when you're actually in a crisis,
absolutely,
that freeze, fight, or flight response that we've all heard about before, that's going to kick in, but it's going to kick in on the freeze side, right? But if we've had these discussions before, and some of these topics are scary to some people out there, so having a discussion rather than jumping straight into a drill or an exercise, facilitate the understanding, the knowledge that, hey, this can happen. Because quite frankly, we do deal with some stakeholders that adhere to the mindset of, oh, this will never happen here. This can't happen to us. And that's a tough conversation. How do you have that conversation with a stakeholder that is adamant about this can't happen here, regardless of the prevalence of data? And we talk, it's easy for us in cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency to talk about security, but we all know that oftentimes security costs too much until that day that it doesn't. And we're trying through preparedness, through planning, through conversations and training to ensure that those black sky days don't happen.
Which is one of the reasons that I enjoy working for CISA so much, because the resources we develop, as he talks about, when we deal with our private sector partners, one of those concerns is the cost, right? Security is a cost. It doesn't generate revenue, it's a cost. So it's on that expense side of the sheet. So one of the great things about being in CISA is that what we develop are either no cost or low cost resources. We provide free resources. Everything that we have described, the trainings, the products, the videos, are all free. It's at no charge. And so that is one of our great, and it's one of the great openings for those PSAs as they're working within the communities, is what we're offering does not increase the cost of that security, but we're also increasing the security.
Yeah, I mean, it's the things that you can do today. And what I also love about the resources is everybody's security situation is not the same. So you can take these and use what works for you, but it gives you a guideline on how to think about these threats and how to be ready for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Both of us in both of our products and training, one of the first things we talk about is establishing a baseline. Understanding what your baseline is helps you recognize what's suspicious. It helps you recognize what your security profile is. And it's going to differ. It's going to differ from town to town. It's going to differ from building to building. And so understanding that and recognizing that's key.
Yeah, and the key, and regardless of your community, regardless of the threat, there are common things such as understanding your own organization or community. What are your assets that are available? What are you trying to protect? Is it people? Is it equipment? Is it all of the above? What are your threats? The threats in my community may not be the same as the threats in your community. And then what are our vulnerabilities? As we continue to work through this, it helps to identify our vulnerabilities. What are our gaps? And our resources can then help offer mitigation options for consideration to help buy down some of those risks. Now, where our differences with some of our stakeholders is every organization is different in terms of their level of risk that they're willing to accept, the level of resources that they have available to either acquire new resources, which is why what we do is so valuable, because it is free, it is accessible, and we try to write things to a level that you don't even have to have any prior safety or security experience to understand and slowly process what we deliver and make yourself more resilient.
Okay, I feel like you guys were correct when you told me that we could make this a 4-hour CISA Live, and we could talk about this all day. And I do have more questions, but I think this is a good moment to take a break and take some questions from the audience. So the first one is, how do you get people to take ownership of their own safety? And I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I want to see what you guys say.
You want to take that one first?
Okay, I'll take it first. Taking ownership. Well, I think it starts with some of the things we already talked about. Awareness. It's hard to take ownership of your own security if you're not really aware of the security environment. And it's really not about being hyper vigilant. When we talk about awareness, it's just some common sense principles of being knowledgeable of what's going on around us and putting it into a perspective that people can understand. One of the examples that we like to use is, think about all the places that you go to on a daily basis, like a grocery store or a restaurant. How often, us as being creatures of habit, do we always go in the same door and we exit the same door? But have we ever asked ourselves a question, what if? What if an incident happened here today? Do I know where other exits are? What would I do if I was by myself? What would I do if I had my kids with me? Would my mental plan change? Taking that 10 seconds to think about what my mental plan may be in some of those situations helps make it more real for folks that are thinking about, where do I start? How do I become empowered? And making it real helps.
I think the key to getting people to take ownership is they have to understand the threat. So Dan hit on it earlier. We deal with so many people who are of the belief, well, that's not going to happen here. That happens in the big city, or that happens to the big company, or whatever. And so understanding there is a threat is that first step to being able to take ownership in your security.
And we're not trying to scare people.
Yeah,
we're just trying to prepare
It's
people.
prepared.
It's
It's being
Not
prepared.
scare, but prepared.
Yeah.
And it costs
Oh, I like
nothing
that.
in many cases to be prepared.
Do you guys have T-shirts that say "Not
We
scared"?
we will,
Yeah.
and it's going to be registered trademark to Curt and Dan.
Well, and it was, as we were talking about people, taking their own safe. I mean, part of it too, to me, is people recognizing that they're part of the solution. Like,
Absolutely.
they're not a passive bystander. Like,
Absolutely. Actually,
I think
and
we should have upstander T-shirts made too.
yeah, and there's data to support that. So there was a
Yeah.
study done, and I don't want to, nerd out on data, but there was a study done to talk about, well, is see something, say something effective? Or is reporting from the public helpful? And they looked at nearly 600 terrorist plots, and then they looked further at the ones 300 and something that were prevented, and they looked at how were they prevented. And in nearly 80% of those 300 prevented plots, they were prevented because an initial tip was provided by a member of the public, whether they saw something in person or they saw someone post something, which is becoming more and more common on social media, right? You know where I'm going with that? And they didn't just ignore it as, oh, someone's just joking, someone's just blowing off steam. But I think in today's day and age, the way the environment has changed is we can no longer pass up seeing things like that as a joke. And we have to let people know who have more training and more resources and authorities to look into that further to see, is it really a joke? And it starts with someone just being a concerned citizen.
Yep. Okay, ready for the next question?
So,
All right. How have the conversations shifted? Oh, this is a good one. And this actually kind of dovetails into one of my questions. How have the conversations shifted with cyber and ransomware attacks, moving from mainly machine and data threats to now affecting physical security and infrastructure?
So you started the last one. I'll start. So
You got it.
I will tell you, I think that we have definitely seen a shift in this, and we've seen a continued. It is one of the reasons CISA exists the way it does, right? There's a reason that the federal agency is cybersecurity and infrastructure security put together. As I said, CISA was created in November of 2018, and I was around when we were just the infrastructure protection office, right? So very, very aware that these were put together purposely. And so there is definitely daily conversations now about that cyber physical convergence, right? How one affects the other. And they can go both ways. That physical attack can certainly shut down the cyber systems as well. And so it is a daily conversation where I can tell you 6 years ago, it probably wasn't. So I think the creation of CISA has really helped drive that conversation even more so at least in the federal government space.
And really, when we're looking at being vigilant, we look at potential insider threats. We look at someone who may have a grievance. They're in our workplace. Maybe a way for them to realize and affect their grievance may not necessarily be through a violent act. Maybe it's through stealing data or corrupting some of our information systems, as insiders, because they have access. So the physical cyber convergence there in terms of the realization of a potential threat. Or what about our physical security protection systems, like electronic locks, video surveillance systems that we have around our facility? Where's that data going? Is that data protected? Is the information is the location where we house and save our emergency action plans safe and secure? And so the physical cyber convergence aspect ranges the full spectrum.
I mean, I think that evolution is not, I mean, it's going to just continue to grow more and more in terms of just that intersection.
It's about an integrated approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, how, you mentioned previously about how things on social media and like people seeing things there that they can use to, kind of tip off and look for those kinds of like behaviors. And that's a great example of how that moves from the cyber to the physical,
for sure,
like realm. All right. Question 3. Okay. Could you give a few specific success stories of thwarted attacks, somewhere where enhanced situational awareness led to a peaceful outcome?
So I can provide one because we use it as a case example in one of our courses. I will start before I get into this. I will say this is one of the challenges being in a prevention aspect is how do you rate success? How do you prove you have prevented something, right? So how do you show that success? But to give you one example of where situational awareness, without naming names or going into specifics, this was a case that occurred a few years ago in Minnesota. And we had a lady who was just in her home and noticed, kind of strange, a teenager walking through her backyard, was not common, watched him, saw him enter into a storage facility, one of the storage facilities, thought that was a little strange, and so reported it, did what we asked. You see something that's out of your baseline, out of your norm, and reported it. She thought maybe he was breaking into the storage facility, maybe he was, her statement actually was maybe he's doing drugs, whatever. When the police responded, the young teenager was inside the storage facility actually building ID devices and had a complete manifesto written of how he was going to attack the school, his high school. And so we have a very big possible school attack that was thwarted by one person looking at and saying, this doesn't feel right to me, and being that upstander that then reported that. So we've got a great example. We use it in one of our trainings of that small situational awareness thwarting what could have been a major disaster and catastrophe.
And we had an incident just last year in our own neck of the woods here in Virginia. A concerned individual saw something in the early morning hours of Saturday night, Sunday morning on social media that was concerning to them of an individual that they knew, and they reported it to their local law enforcement, who happened to be in Maryland. Maryland law enforcement looked into it, shared the information fairly rapidly that morning with officials in Virginia, who were starting to now coordinate a local law enforcement response. And to make a long story short, it just turns out that individual had already posted images on social media holding a firearm outside their target location, which happened to be a church in Virginia, and they were already entered the facility. Security officials had been observant to notify, why is an individual wearing black sunglasses, a black hoodie, a black sweatshirt, entering services late? So we had observant security officials. While this was happening in the background, law enforcement were doing their work, and they arrived on scene, ultimately taking into custody an individual who had a loaded firearm with the expressed intent of conducting an attack in a local church here in Virginia. And that all was started because a concerned individual saw something concerning on social media, and they decided to contact 911.
Well, and I think you bring up an excellent point in terms of, this is not a call for people to like tell on somebody wearing a hoodie or, you know, somebody they don't like or what have you. It's really all of those factors coming together that make someone sort of take notice, you know, be aware and say something is not quite right here.
I think the key is, and we both use it in our presentations, people are not suspicious, behaviors are. So what we're looking is that suspicious behavior, suspicious activity. We're not looking for suspicious people. People are not suspicious. It's their behaviors and their activities that we focus on.
And it can be cultural. It can be different, you know, in certain places of the country, it may be normal to do or typical to do certain things. In other parts of the country, it may not. So it's what is typical for your environment. You know, we may have the luxury working in spaces where we're always surrounded with the same people. I may know what's typical for you. You know what's typical for me. But what about those folks that are law enforcement, emergency responders, customer service staff, hospital and healthcare workers who are dealing with different customers every day? They don't necessarily know what's typical for the individual, but they know what's typical for the surroundings, for the context. And to be on the lookout for what's different from that normal, that usual baseline that I can typically see. It's certainly helpful. And then in terms of barriers to reporting, which is I think what you're getting at, you know, the whole quote of snitches get stitches. Back in the day, we grew up with that, right? It starts with your organizational culture, having a policy that identifies what those prohibited activities are, making sure that leadership is actually both in writing and in action, supporting that culture, that mindset of security awareness. And then certainly having reporting mechanisms that are both anonymous and confidential to remove those barriers so that I don't feel like there's maybe an atmosphere of retribution if I do report. And ultimately, it's not about telling on someone. It's about getting someone who needs help, the help they need before they go too far down that pathway. That's what it's really about. It's about helping people, not telling on people.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What less obvious barriers exist in underserved communities that hinder early intervention against physical threats? And how can we address these to ensure more equitable protection?
So I'll share one that I have dealt with here recently. So as we work with our faith-based communities, and that's a great, you know, example, how do you mitigate? It's that less obvious, that barrier, because their goal is to keep their facilities open. They want people, they want to be inviting, and so from a security aspect, as we're trying to limit access control and stop that potential threat from getting in, their goal is to not. Their goal is to bring everybody in, bring the community together, to be that open resource. So how do you mitigate that barrier? And that's something we've worked really hard through multiple programs. We are right now, today is the last day of DHS's Protecting Places of Worship Weeks of Action. It's the last 2 weeks have been the weeks of action. And so we've provided a lot of resources on how to kind of mitigate that desire, but also enhance that protection. And so, you know, we've got resources out there, but those are some of those less obvious barriers. We come at things with a security mindset and then get pushed back from some of these communities leaders who go, we're not going to do that because this is our mission. This is our goal. So you have to work together to find out what that common answer is.
It is such a conversation. I mean, Well, we look at safety and security, and we look at open and welcoming. And those two are not mutually exclusive. I would argue that in order to be effectively open and welcoming, you have to be safe and secure beforehand so that people don't feel anxious or uncomfortable in that open and welcoming environment. They have to feel confident that when they go to the house of worship or that school or that underserved community, that they are in a location that is safe and secure. And there are, again, within our resources, shameless plug, but that provide options for consideration to help buy down some of those risks. What about not just having greeters, but are your greeters knowledgeable of what to be a lookout? They're potentially our guardians, right? And then another thing, a barrier that was asked in that question is trust and information sharing. And relationships go both ways, but we all know that within houses of worship and faith-based communities, a threat to one house of worship in one community typically means that there's threats to other houses of worship in the community. So are those houses of worship sharing information with each other? Are they sharing information with local law enforcement? Are you inviting local law enforcement over your facility to actually have them become more familiar with your policies and procedures? Have them over for a coffee when they're taking a break. Offer your parking lot to them. That may be a way to build that trust, that relationship, so that if heaven forbid you ever do have an incident at your location, that your local law enforcement is more familiar with your facility should the need ever arise.
I think that's a great point. It's all about partnerships, collaboration, and working together for just a safer communities and safer nation. Unbelievably, we've come to the end of our time. So if there are questions that have not been addressed, we will answer them in the chat. So thank you for those. But as we bring Preparedness Month to a close, final takeaways from each of you, like what is the 1 to 3 things that you want people to remember as we close out Preparedness Month?
Okay, I'll start, and
Okay.
he's gonna
One to
he's
three.
gonna finish it
1
off.
to 3. I know, very
1 to 3.
specific.
So 1
I
to
gave
3
you a range.
with part A, part B, and part C within 3 within 17.
You got to wrap it up in like 10
17
seconds.
parts. So identify whether or not your organization has a plan. Be familiar with your organization's plans, procedures, and then get up and practice those procedures so that in the event something does happen, you know what to do.
I love it.
That's great. And I would agree, planning, but we've been focusing, and I'll end with a shameless plug. CISA has so many resources. You have so much that's available. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of those resources that will help you be better prepared, will help you build those plans.
And it's on CISA.gov.
All of it.
And you can check it out. You can click on them. You can see which ones work for you.
Download
which
them.
ones you don't know how to use. You can call your PSA. You can call your regional office, and we're here to help. So with that, I do want to end because I loved it. The tagline should be not to scare, but to prepare. What was it?
We're here to prepare you, not scare you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Ask those questions, be prepared, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining.